If you can please take your seats. We are going to start the second session of this excellent meeting. Before we go into that, I have to make an announcement. A women's ring was found in the ladies' room. If somebody has lost it, they can pick it up outside with Jennifer. First of all, allow me to thank you, the representatives on freedom of the media and the German chairmanship to the OSCE for making this gathering possible. The discussion this morning was extremely interesting and inspiring. And for this afternoon, we have three impressive speakers who will share with you their experience in analyzing and fighting propaganda for war and hatred from a media perspective. We have heard this morning the challenges that international and national law faces in limiting speech to the extent necessary in order to stop hate speech and incitement to violence, and yet make sure that laws are not open to abuses that would lead to restriction on legitimate speech. This afternoon, we will discuss other mechanisms, self-regulatory ones, best practices, and possibly others, that may contribute to better define the gray area that is inevitably left by statutory regulation, and so ensure that the news media our societies consume, maybe not individually, but certainly in their complexity and multiplicity, so that the body of news and opinion that reaches our societies are adequate to fulfill the public interest and the right of the people to be informed. When the International Press Institute, an international network of journalists for which I've been working for many years, was founded in the year 1950, the need for such an organization was identified by its founding fathers and mothers in reaction to the horrors that two world wars and the acknowledgement that propaganda and the media had played a big part in them, in particular in World War II. So they identified three objectives of the IPI that need to be fulfilled in order to ensure that propaganda for war that we had experienced will not be repeated. The first one is that the media must be free to disseminate news and opinions. The second one is the media should aim at the highest possible professional standards. And the third one is that we need to encourage a dialogue between journalists across nations. Interestingly, these 3 points are included in the excellent recommendations included in the representatives' non-paper. I'm turning to our speakers to enlighten us with their experience. In a war situation or in preparing for war, can journalism still aim at being fair and independent? How can it achieve these objectives in spite of the immense pressure it is under? Our speakers will be Mr. Yuri Kazakov, who is the Deputy Chair of the Chamber of Media Audience and the Public Collegium on Press Complaints in the Russian Federation. Mr. Boro Kontic, on my right, Director of the Media Center in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, who has analyzed the propaganda during, before, and after the war in the Balkans. And Ms. Victoria Romaniuk, who is the Deputy Chief Editor of a website called stopfake.org in the Ukraine. I think it speaks for itself. So I'll turn to Mr. Kazakov, if you would like to start and let us know how can the media fight propaganda for war and hatred.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how media can fight propaganda. My concept of my task here is narrow, is not as widespread. And permit me at the beginning to express my gratitude to the organizers of the conference for this opportunity to speak about this important topic. And I think we will also talk about gray zones. And of course, regulatory issues are the competency of the of professionals. I would rather like to touch upon the experience of colleagues. Propaganda will be 400 years old very soon, if someone might have forgotten. Journalism is not older than 100 years old, and I'm talking about professional journalism, about the type of professional journalism that is based on guidelines, on ethics, on a code of behavior that follows certain regulations. Journalism and propaganda have different ages, have different capacities to react to the challenges of our time. Propaganda has set itself this aim that the ends justify the means. Propaganda is not a profession, is not a specialization, is not a trade, even if those who are experts in propaganda, who know how to impact on the brains of people. Because journalists are very limited in the methods they are allowed to use. If you are a journalist, you always have to think about the consequences of what you write. This is not a limitation to the freedom of speech. It is a professional expression of professional standards. And now I'd like to present to you the main notion of my statement. I would like to remind you of a fable by Lev Tolstoy. He wrote a five-line fable, and I'd like to quote it now. It is called The Liar. A boy was watching the sheep, and pretending that he saw a wolf, he began to cry, "Help! A wolf! A wolf!" The peasants came running up and saw that it was not so. After doing this for a second and a third time, it happened that a wolf came indeed. The boy began to cry, "Come, come, quickly, wolf!" The peasants thought that he was deceiving them as usual and paid no attention to him. The wolf saw that there was no reason to be afraid. He leisurely killed the whole flock. And that's the end of the fable. So why did I quote this fable now? Why am I quoting this example? Because I am afraid that if we talk about propaganda, and I don't want to talk about propaganda of war, this is a separate topic. If we are going to talk about the sort of propaganda that paves the way for wars, for armed conflict, that prepares for war, then I need to mention that there is a danger that experts might reach a point where any offending, irritating, or even shocking statement or text might be labeled propaganda just for emotional reasons. This danger does exist, and that's why I'd like to remind you that the freedom of speech was achieved with great difficulties, and it is easy to lose it, because if we perceive or label any text that we do not like as propaganda, we are going to lose this important right, freedom of speech. And that's why it is very important for us that we make an attempt, that we learn how to distinguish between bad journalism, low-level journalism, low-quality journalism, even stupid journalism on the one hand, and propaganda on the other hand. And that's why I would like to especially touch upon political propaganda, discriminatory propaganda, with certain aggressive features. Our problem, a problem of our times, a problem of my country. And here, I'm not a representative of my country. I'm not even a representative of the collegium that I belong to, because no one asked me to come and speak here on behalf of the collegium. I was the chair for 5 years of this collegium, and during this time the collegium adopted a large number of decisions. One of them I'd like to describe because it contains a definition of propaganda that was used for this specific decision. For us, this was a very important moment. And looking back, when I read through all these decisions that were adopted, that were taken after 2005, I decided to read through 85 decisions, and I must say that 10 decisions did not directly mention the word propaganda. For example, the Ukrainian Commission complained about an ethics issue. There was also a complaint about the Kiselyov broadcast. And so in 10 out of 85 decisions, the word propaganda was not mentioned. It was all about how to use public space for propaganda purposes. And this was something very unfortunate. This is something that I regretted, because the major part of journalism is state journalism. And that's why those who spread propaganda feel totally secure, totally protected. And I think you will agree with me when I say that this space, that is actually the space of professional journalism, is being damaged. Of course, some of you might be outraged. We can talk about reasons. But this space is not guided by the instructions of professional journalism. And this is a very complicated, very difficult situation. When our colleagues are confronted with cases of propaganda, they need to decide how to react to it. So what are you going to do? You have to review a text and you have to come to a decision. When you find 5 signs for the fact that this is not journalism, then you can remain indifferent. You can say this is propaganda, or you might say, okay, this is propaganda, this is journalism with some features of propaganda. We decided to take the first approach. And I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the bodies of self-regulation were the first ones to identify this propaganda. Maybe that's why these cases made it into the Red Book. So these are the professional cases that we have to deal with. I think they are not of any particular interest to you, but we were confronted with a situation where our system was flooded by such texts, and that's why we decided to conduct a seminar on propaganda. We devoted an entire day to propaganda, not even mentioning Russian journalism. We invited experts, we invited our colleagues, teachers from university were present, practitioners, scientists, etc. So what were we able to agree on? It's not what is written in the book. That's what I can tell you immediately. What is propaganda material? What are the features, the characteristics of propaganda? First of all, it's ordered material. There is a wonderful Russian word by the name of zaказуха. And of course, in the West, you don't have that kind of order, journalism upon order, but there is an order. The order is being carried out in a good or in a bad fashion. It's deceptive journalism. And of course, one of the main features of such journalism is bias, is also the fact that it can be easily detected. When you look at such material, you will immediately see that it is biased, that it is prejudice, that it has all the criteria of biased material, because such material cannot be the subject of normal journalism, of normal articles. And I'd like to add that propaganda is not a profession, it is a special field, although specialization can be distinguished, cannot be immediately distinguished from a profession. It uses different instruments. Whoever spreads propaganda knows exactly which formats to use. 20 years of Soviet propaganda. Why do I not get applause? I am an expert in 20 years of Soviet propaganda, and that's why I know how it used to be done up until to the 1980s, and I know how it is handled today. Today, of course, our friends have more technology, but less education, I think, but that's okay. They still do a good job. Propaganda material always used the image of an enemy. Without the image of an enemy, you cannot manipulate, you cannot spread propaganda. Propaganda material, as a rule, links the external enemy with an internal enemy. This is something that we are confronted with on a constant basis. This chain is being followed, and I think the promoter of propaganda doesn't even know why he is doing it, but it happens. And of course, we use only a selection of facts. And what is more important, propaganda tries to use the concept of public interest. And this notion of public interest is being misused. That's where propaganda operates. It manipulates the interests and emotions of a person. Because when you are afraid, you are concerned, and then you are an easy object of manipulation. You are a victim of manipulation. Propaganda manipulates a specific person and not only the abstract opinion. Propaganda, and this is another conclusion that I can draw on the basis of our seminar, propaganda talks about national interest, talks about public interest, and does not care about the Constitution. The Constitution is not necessary. A Constitution is a hindrance, is an impediment, whereas propaganda has totally different interests. Brainwashing, shaping the concept of peace in people's minds, of war. Propaganda loves to use and to abuse public opinion. We find that in TV, in the press, of course, also opinion columns. Opinion columns are the favorite playground of propaganda. Why? Because opinion columns enjoy full freedom of speech. And so this is one of the greatest sins of propaganda. Why do I say sin? Because the Holy Congregation of the Propagation for the Propagation of the Faith was, of course, one of the primary sources of propaganda. Propaganda means having an impact on an object, and the object is usually a citizen, a person. What else is propaganda? Propaganda tries to spread a certain notion and is always driven by a system. This is a very important aspect if we want to differentiate bad journalism from propaganda. A promoter of propaganda works as a professional when he represents a system. Propaganda uses values, uses ideals, and maybe you remember the Strugatsky brothers. They said that if your ideal forces you to do mean things, then your ideal is not worth anything. This is a quote from the Strugatsky brothers. Propaganda can be detected easily, and we even found out that there are certain word constructions that are frequently used in propaganda. Those who use propaganda systematically could be called agents of a system. Why are we worried by propaganda? Propaganda has occupied a dominating share of media, tries to subdue them, tries to subjugate them. So far, it hasn't been possible to conquer media as a whole. But it is a very dangerous development, and of course, the civilian population reacts to propaganda. For example, special propaganda. I wrote a whole series of articles on special propaganda. I think some of my colleagues will remember. Special propaganda is particularly bad because it is directed against the civilian population. Vladimir Yakovlev wrote an article about this. Propaganda is always directed at an enemy in times of war, and special propaganda is, of course, only one of the subcategories of propaganda. Those who promote propaganda have learned how to imitate, how to simulate a situation that cannot be immediately detected as propaganda by the average, by the ordinary viewer. Propaganda is exploiting the confidence that the general public has with respect to journalism, the standards of ethics that define journalism. Propaganda uses all kinds of formats from talk shows to political discussions to information broadcasts, etc. And this, again, is an abuse of public space, because normally a journalist is responsible for the quality of his product. When a journalist takes off his jacket and becomes a promoter of propaganda, then the audience doesn't notice it, because for the audience, this is still the professional journalist. And I'd like to remind you of something else. In Russia, there is a traditional mentality that has developed over many, many years, where a good journalist is someone who writes all kinds of products, and it is a person of middle age or even advanced age, and someone who spreads propaganda and who is able to imitate a writer, a good writer, will be very successful, because the general public is not really interested in dry information. Dry information is boring. It is much more interesting to get emotional information, to get colorful information, which sets the tone for people. So please note that propaganda always sets the tone for a certain sentiment among the general public. Propaganda, if we take it seriously, is always characterized by a certain entropy, because it destroys the profession of journalism. It destroys the solidarity among journalists, and that's why we need to stress entropy. Do I still have half a minute? Thank you. I'm going to leave out other parts of my presentation. I'm going to come to the main conclusions. What can we do? What can we do under these circumstances? I think it is important not to give in to pressure. That's very important, but it is very difficult. And a journalist should not lie. And of course, publications need to verify text. They need to check whether it is propaganda. If you want to really be a professional journalist, you have to check whether you are publishing lies or propaganda. And of course, journalists should not conclude contracts with the devil. It is very difficult to avoid propaganda, journalistic propaganda, but it is possible. And we need to observe certain categories that have to be also kept in mind. I'm going to publish the full version of my statement on the website of the media representative, and I think we need to work with experts. We need to work with the teachers of journalism. We need to also work with the promoters of propaganda. We need to work with the originators of propaganda, although it might seem hopeless. And of course, there are non-governmental organizations. As long as we are not able to raise awareness among the general public about propaganda, there will always be propaganda. And of course, and this is maybe also hopeless, but it might be possible to use pro-state structures like the chamber of non-commercial organizations that are interested in retaining the Constitution in order to prevent that the Constitution be destroyed. I think someone who's lived as long as I knows a lot of things about propaganda. Propaganda will pass just like everything else is going to pass. I hope my life is going to be longer than the life of propaganda. But I think 400 years of propaganda we are going to be able to celebrate together. Thank you.
For ending on a positive tone. Also, thank you for your recommendation. Do not give in to pressure, do not lie, check the accuracy of what you're publishing. Keep the dialogue open, and it is possible to fight propaganda. Thank you for that. Our next speaker on my right, Boro Kantic. She's the director of the Media Center in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Boro, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I would like to just stress a couple of points for our discussion in the afternoon. And I would like to, in the beginning, just to remind you that, I mean, propaganda and the crisis situation, propaganda and the war, that is a twins. I mean, they are always coming together, and propaganda is an essential part of crisis situation, because in a normal time you have a time for checking, you have a time for dialogue, you have from time to time. But in a crisis situation, they know that they need a quick effect, and that is really space for that type of news and that type of topics. But in the beginning, I would like to point one very crucial moment for all of us, because all the time we are talking media, journalists, propaganda, and other things. But I mean, probably all of us knows that that is not the whole picture. I don't want to calculate, is it a small part of the picture or is it a big part of the picture, but whatever. Media and the journalists are only part of that story, and in this topic there is not only one who is guilty. I mean, there is also others who are enormously involved in all what we call propaganda, from politicians and political parties to the academics, intellectuals, historians, and even what we call the general public. I mean, now when we have that social network and digital era, everybody can say that that is people formerly known as audience. And I mean, they are also in many ways involved in that, because from time to time you see that even general public hardly waiting to listen the lies they would like to see as a truth. And it means that when we are discussing about all these things, we have to really be very, very, not only to put media and journalists, they are part of guiltiness, but I mean, they are not the only one who is guilty. But why media, and when media and journalists are guilty in spreading propaganda and other things? All the time when they are not following what is rules of the profession. Believe or not, but there is some rules in this profession, and some of them is very, very, very strong. A couple of months ago, in a media center I'm running, we have also one web portal. It's just completely devoted to the media questions, and all what we are publishing almost every day almost every or 2 days new article. That is some media topic from Bosnia or from the region or from the world discussing about different things. And just a couple of months ago, we called one Bosnian, one of the best Bosnian journalists. His name is Zlatko Dizdarevic, and he is now retired, but still doing many things. He started his career in the 80s in the Middle East, and actually he is one of the experts for the Middle East. And I called him just a few months ago because he also, at the end of his career, when he almost stopped to be a journalist, he became an ambassador of Bosnia. They sent him just in a Jordan, covered the whole area. It means that he had his view about the Middle East from a both perspective as a journalist on the field, but also as a diplomat who visited almost all that country. And he was a diplomat in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and others in the last 5-6 years. And I just called him to make as one article about how he see how the media covering the Syria war, what he see as a problem, benefits and other things and so on. And he made pretty big article with the title Syria, Defeat of Journalism, and tried to explain from a different position why he saw Syria as a defeat of journalism. Shortly, he explained that the Syria is a field of the biggest geopolitical reconstruction of the world in a moment of the Middle East, and just try to explain a position of media and why media doing wrong in a Syria case, and use one example which is a pretty interesting, very simple, and I think we could discuss about it. Probably all of you know that when journalists making a news, they are using that famous 5W. You know, that is who, what, when, where, and why. And he said that the problem with the journalism now, when they're talking about Syria and that conflict, is because they never using that fifth word in a column, that why. That why. It means that they are using who, what, when, where, but why all the time missing. And he see that as a beginning of defeat of the what we called in a traditional media serious journalism. Probably you know that every news in a theory is made like an upside pyramid, and you have in the beginning big story about who, what's happened, and so on and so on. At the end, you know, you have something like references. Why that story is connected with other stories. That is to put the news into the bigger context, just to understand why. And that is all the time missing that is what he thinks that is why journalists defeated in front of the events they don't want to tell why something happening and all that. Probably that is a question all the time you can put today in Ukraine, or you could put that in a war in ex-Yugoslavia. Many times during that war happened between 1991 and 1995. Also, you can include the Kosovo war at the end of the 90s as a part of the whole story. But he thinks, and I completely agree, I would like to share with all of you, I mean, that why is missing all the time in the stories we are talking. And also, when we are talking about the propaganda, there is a different situation, what can happen. And in some countries, you have when government impose, for example, censorship and other things, and that is a completely different story. And journalists are in a different positions than if they are, I could say, free just to choose topics and others. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, during the war, government never imposed censorship. just at the end of the war, in June 1995, they sent some of the members of the army to control the main TV news. That was just in 3 or 4 months before war was finished. But some of the newspapers, some of the media imposing a different kind of the rules for the journalists, how they can cover certain situation, how they can use, which kind of language they are going to use for the different events. And that's happened in ex-Yugoslavia. Actually, Croatian TV, they established a list of the terms you have to use if you are going to cover some event. For example, they had a list of the names for the enemy, mainly coming from Serbia or Montenegro in that time, and also the names for the internationals, for many of that things. And if you were a journalist in that time, you needed just to follow that, strictly to follow that rules. And among other things, probably you know that during the war in Croatia in 1991, 1992, and later, the Serbs on their part of the territory organized almost like a state, and they called that state Krajina. And also among that rules for the Croatian journalists, there was a rule that you never use the word Krajina. You have to put before that so-called Krajina. Just if you're just in a position to say that, you have to do that. And happened in that time, I mean, that war was on different periods, with the real war and some peaceful time and so on and so on. And something happened that there was a famous singer in Croatia in that time with a famous instrument, gusle, that is a folk instrument, just for these old stories from old time about brave people from Croatia making a battle for, and so on and so on. And he had a concert in one town in Croatia. His name is Đuro Krajina. It means I don't need to say anything. But the journalist who covered the case, just reported that night that so-called Đuro Krajina, But I mean, that is also. But when we started to talk about this topic, Barbara sent me a few questions and said, do you have in your legal procedure, in your legal documents in Bosnia and Herzegovina, or for example, do you have in a council of print, do they have some rules and regulations, and is there any propaganda inside? And I just called immediately the lady who is running our council for the print media, and I know that they have rules, they have a pretty good document on a couple of pages with the different things, just how to deal with the different problems and so on and so on. And I just sent to her a letter and said, is there any propaganda inside? And I've got to answer 2 days. She really think about the whole story and send me. This is a pretty good question. Believe or not, but we have no any propaganda. We have something like advertising. We have something about sponsorship, but nothing about propaganda and who our rules. But I mean, what is also a problem with the propaganda during a crisis, during the war, and so on and so on? Because many of the things you are reporting, after 15, 20, or 40 years, finally you can get some answers for the things you reported. It means that propaganda is not only the spoiling the profession, changing your perception, but also changing the content of some words. It means that history is not talking about the past. History is almost almost future, because after 20 years of the event, now finally, when everything become history, you understand what's happened in your country, like what's happened last year when we commemorated 20 years after Srebrenica, you know, the biggest crime after the Second World War, genocide in that town. After 20 years, one of the journalists from France published a book. The book was published also in Bosnia. And finally, we know that international community abandoned that city few months before July 1995. And actually, for them, that was a desirable situation if Serbs occupied the city, because that will be easy for the future peace negotiation and peace for Bosnia and Herzegovina, because that city was just near to the border of Serbia, and they decided, okay, nobody calculated which kind of the crime is going to happen. But I mean, 20 years after that, you realize that you lived in a society and you talk with the people who send you official statements and other things, and you know that you were part of the propaganda, you didn't know where you're living. Okay, that is for the beginning. We can talk after 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the example you brought from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I think from the Yugoslav conflict. I remember when NATO bombed the radio television Serbia. I think that's when the big discussion about are journalists who do propaganda still journalists started also. Yeah. So that's indeed a very good, there is a lot to study there. Our last panelist is Victoria Romaniuk, Deputy Chief Editor of StopFake.org website in Ukraine. Victoria, thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for an amazing opportunity to take part in this discussion. I would like to start my presentation by showing you one slide. I would like to kindly ask you to draw your attention to the slide. The slide depicts an ironic screenshot that has been presented in an ironic manner on a Twitter account. I would like for all of us to have a look at this screenshot and to see what exactly is mentioned there. You see a pseudo-activist, Maria Tsipko. She is a popular person in Ukraine. She has been on air on Russian TV channels on many occasions. She has been present in Donetsk, Odessa, Kharkov, and Crimea. She posed as a refugee. She presented herself as a mother or a resident of Odessa who called upon Putin to come to Simferopol and save the population from Kiev junta. Many have been laughing at the message that had been published on this screenshot. However, it became a good example of how Russian propaganda has changed in the course of 2 years. Here she poses as a young girl. I'm speaking about the case of the alleged rape of a 13-year-old Lisa. Here you can see what happened in Ukraine 2 years ago, and I would like to ask you to carefully look at the screenshot. This is what Europe has been faced with. This is what we have all come across. This is the evolution of Russian propaganda. Two years ago, this situation has emerged exclusively in Ukraine. We consider this to be our own problem. However, nowadays the whole world is talking about it. And this fact has been accepted by Germany. We have spoken about it on several occasions today. It has been mentioned that Russian propaganda and the methods it employs leads to the situation whereby it spreads across other countries.
Прошу прощения. В 2015
In year 2015, our journalists have registered an expansion of Russian propaganda. In other words, Russian propaganda has reached the international arena. Next slide shows a whole range of different topics covered by propaganda. We have analyzed a whole variety of different issues covered by Russian propaganda. Here we can see that among the topics are Turkey, Ukraine, Germany, and this in fact can lead us to make conclusions about Russian propaganda machine. On this slide you can see a screenshot of the article which exposes information that has been provided by Russia stating that jihadists have been fighting in Ukraine. Even the heading of the article points to Russian propaganda. Now I would like to explain what is it that our organization is doing. We have launched our project in 2014 as a response on the part of professional journalists to those events that have unfolded in Ukraine. We have been trying to counter the media war, and by so doing we came across the whole wave of absurd lies which have been spread around, and they were used in order to form wrong opinion about Ukraine. Journalists working for Stop Fake had to give lie to absurd statements or information that has been spread around, stating that members of Bandera or junta has come to power and the Ukrainians are hanging children on trees. Stop Fake is the project which has been launched by professional journalists. It is a civilian project which was developed by journalists who wanted to demonstrate the truth. We have 8 language services working with us. We publish our materials in English, Romanian, Russian, Italian, Spanish and French languages. In 2 years we have managed to collect the whole archive of many examples of Russian propaganda which point to the fact that Russian propaganda is undergoing changes. I have shown you on the first slide how things are changing and what we have at the moment. I believe that these materials are important not only to study propaganda as a phenomena. These materials can be used when filing a lawsuit against violations. This is the archive which is readily accessible in several languages, and there you can find examples of different violations. We do not carry out any sort of propaganda. We keep to journalist standards and we use modern methods to verify facts and visual information.
мы не создаем каких-либо.
We do not provide any new information. We simply analyze the information coming in. I would like to give you another example of fake information that has been published by us on Monday. This is fake information that has been published on the site called Novorossiya. These materials are interesting for the following reason. First and foremost, the article states that allegedly Ukrainian army is looting on the territory of Lugansk Oblast. This article is based on one single comment that has been voiced by a militant supported by Russia. But that's besides the point. The most important is the photograph that has been published in the article. We have carefully studied the photograph, and as a result of the research that has been conducted by our organization, we came to the conclusion that this photograph has been shot in 1995 during the First Chechen War. and Eric Bouvet is the author of the photograph. In fact, this photograph has been used as evidence of the fact that the Ukrainian army is carrying out searches and looting. However, we believe that what really helps media organizations to keep the audience's attention is trust. Losing the trust of our audience brings up the situation whereby our media organizations can no longer be present on the media market. We have to do our utmost in order to keep the attention of our viewers focused on what we are publishing. Therefore, it is my opinion that those media outlets which are engaged in propaganda are doomed to failure, because sooner or later viewers are going to expose their lies. They will come to the truth. When it comes to Stop Fake project, I would like to mention that we do not publish any information nor any messages. We simply analyze what has been already published in other media outlets. We analyze media texts, and I would like to say that we do not depend on support coming from the state. And I would like to give you another example. This is a screenshot of our website. Here you have an article which has been published by Ukrainian journalist. In her article, she wrote that allegedly Ukrainians are facing visa restrictions or visa bans. However, we managed to prove that this is not the case, and the article has been removed from the website. How do we work, and what do we base our work on is the next issue I would like to touch upon. At the beginning, we have already mentioned the importance of cooperating with wide segments of the society. And the society is a very important partner for our organization, namely for Stop Fake. It is the society that gives us information. It is a major source of information for us. We have urged our audience to help us uncover such materials, and at this particular moment we have a function on our website. You can use this function in order to send false information to our website so we can analyze it and publish it. Thanks to our audience, sometimes we manage to expose false articles or propagandist articles that have been published by other media outlets. Our audience is the source of criticism aimed at us. Of course, sometimes we make errors. Everyone is prone to errors. And our audience is our partner. They immediately point to our failures, we respond immediately, we apologize, and this is an important factor which leads us to work and function within those positions that have laid out. Namely, we uphold our standards, we keep to the values of professionalism. This is something that we cherish greatly. In the course of 2 years of our work, we realized that we have not been doing enough. In fact, we have to act globally. And we have to join efforts with the wider segments of society in order to change the situation. And the only possibility is to increase media literacy. We can do so together with our partners from IROX. In the course of the past 5 months, we have managed to develop the whole methodology to counter propaganda. Training seminars have been conducted in 14 regions in Ukraine, whereby we have managed to educate 10,000 participants. These workshops have been designed to increase media literacy. This is extremely important for us, and nowadays, Perhaps this is the only way to develop critical thinking and to ensure there is interaction with our audience. Another issue that has been touched upon, namely, what is it that we can undertake and whether there can be any ethical standards, rules, or norms within the education system that has been designed to train journalists. Those standards that could actually change the situation when it comes to combating propaganda. I'd like to say that our project is working in 2 universities. Magellan Journalist Academy has been involved in our project, and our master's program on media communications has also got itself involved in developing this project. In fact, our program aimed at increasing media literacy is of utmost importance for us. We have joined Ukrainian-Austrian School on Multimedia, and the major topic is propaganda. We have unique experience that has been gathered by us. I actually noticed that Austrian students fail to fully understand what propaganda is about, and they do not truly understand all the trends that are being observed in Ukraine at this particular moment. I believe it is very important to respond to propaganda not only in those regions which have suffered from crisis. It is important to educate all students and journalists on these particular issues. You never know where the crisis is going to strike next. I'd like to come back to my first slide. 2 years ago, we have been trying to counter propaganda. We have mentioned that this is the problem that has stricken Ukraine exclusively. However, nowadays, this problem is becoming more global. Therefore, journalists should be ready to counter propaganda. He should have the necessary skills to be able to counteract these processes. One of the solutions is to change the education system and to include in education program the methodology that has to be employed when countering propaganda. This is important when training journalists.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Romaniuk. Mr. Romaniuk. Thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting what Stop Fake does. And we come back to what was mentioned in the morning, media literacy, and how media monitoring certainly also contributes to the effort of media literacy. I would like to, we have 15 minutes time before we break for coffee, and we can then continue the conversation after that. But I think in these 15 minutes we have time for a couple of questions from the floor or statements. I would like to ask you to keep your statements to under 2 minutes and make sure that they contribute to the purpose of this session is also to come up with recommendations for the media, for governments, for states, and for all institutions on how to fight propaganda for war and crime and hatred. Thank you very much.
I would like to say the following. I was very happy to listen to presentations of our experts. However, I would like to speak about the following. Namely, given the fact that we have been discussing the methods that have to be employed to counter propaganda, we have to speak about it. I believe that a very interesting story is unfolding at this particular moment. With the support of the OSCE Bureau for Freedom of Media, we have managed to craft a very important project concerning young Ukrainian and Russian journalists. I believe that this particular story is extremely important. Therefore, I would like to touch upon this particular issue. Today, I have listened to experts. I very much like their presentations. However, in my opinion, this story is extremely important because this story points to the presence of a corridor. so to say, in the relations between Ukrainian and Russian media. I believe that we can expand that corridor. We should support those projects and we should continue moving in this particular direction. We have mentioned media literacy. We have mentioned the need to avoid propaganda and keep to the journalist standards. And I believe that we have to push away hatred and to create a new story that can be told to the new generation. Therefore, on the part of our Russian delegation, perhaps we will receive support from our Ukrainian side. I'd like to say that this is the most important project for more than a year. We have been in touch with our Ukrainian colleagues, and I would like to say that this particular product is extremely important for all of us. Perhaps this project is the light at the end of this tunnel that we're digging through the media space. I would like to turn to Victoria Romanuk and ask her the following question. You're analyzing the Russian fake stories. Do you have any fake articles published in Ukrainian media? Perhaps if you do, if you also try to expose fake articles in Ukraine media, then that will be very interesting.
Thank you very much. We'll collect a couple of questions and then ask the panelists to get back. Over there. Oh, sorry. Over there. The gentleman over there. Yes.
My first comment is to...
Здравствуйте, Институт массовой информации.
The Institute of Mass Information, we're a civil organization and we monitor Ukrainian media. However, I'd like to ask a question to Yuri Kazakov about journalists and propagandists. You have mentioned that if a journalist covers certain events and this turns out to be propaganda, then we can say that this is not journalism. We can simply wash our hands. However, the question is, how do we treat those journalists if we have to come across a situation whereby professional organizations are going to defend them? Very often these journalists, they turn to those organizations asking for support or protection. In other words, if a journalist is covering the events and his story turns out to be propaganda, what shall we do about this situation? What's your take on that?
In the very back, and then we have three more, 1, 2, and 3.
My name is Peter Lavelle. I'm with RT Television. I think the woman that just spoke before is absolutely right, because I think you see global audiences shifting away from the mainstream media, going to alternative media. And this is something verifiable. It's not propaganda. Just go to YouTube. What accounts for these news organizations? Alternative, RT is a good example of it. Why do people go there? And I have a simple answer from you. I'll give you a couple of examples. The U.S. government lied to its audience, to its voters, to its people, and to the world about weapons of mass destruction. They weren't there. Who lost their job in media when they echoed U.S. government policy for months on end when there was a drumbeat to war? Who lost their job? Judith Miller did, but for a different reason, at the New York Times. And it happens today. Look at the news briefings at the U.S. State Department. You can watch it online. And I call it the Union of Stenographers. They just write it down, write it down, write it down. The AP guy and the RT girl, the only two people that question the U.S. State Department on very important matters, on matters of Ukraine, of Syria. So, you know, look at the viewers. Because a lot of viewers are sick and tired of propaganda and lies. It never changes. The drumbeat of war. When you think about propaganda as a war crime, look at the entire U.S. media establishment and its surrogates in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman on our right. Sorry. Oh, no, him. Sorry.
Я буду говорить на русском языке.
I'm going to speak in Russian. I come from Bratislava Pan-European University. In order to justify war or military action, historic facts are often used. Historic facts are often used in order to justify these actions, and these facts often contain propaganda. in Slovakia there is a myth that there were no ancient Slavs, there were ancient Slovaks. There's a professor in Ukraine, his name is Bebek. He has published an article pointing to the fact that Aristoteles has been living in Crimea. And Mr. Nikonov said that Russians are Aryans who have come down the Carpathian Mountains. Therefore, Russia should be united with Great Moravia. There are plenty of examples of this particular kind. History is being rewritten to support nationalism, chauvinism, and perhaps egocentrism of certain states. This is all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I would like to remind people to introduce themselves, please.
Максим Додонов, телеканал.
Maxim Dadonov, TV channel Zvezda. It has been mentioned that the media outlets should be free in their actions. It has been mentioned that propagandists are trying to affect the minds of people. Therefore, I would like to ask the following question. Why is it that at this particular conference of OSCE, the 7th edition receives the floor and has the opportunity to speak out? We fully understand what we're talking about. It has been created in 2014. Now we finally realize it has nothing to do with state bodies. However, information is not full. No one says who is supporting this particular editorial. However, there's an international foundation which has been created in 1990s. It belongs to the whole network of George Soros foundations. Often the Soros Foundation has been called an architect of colored revolutions. National Foundation of Democracy with ties with the CIA. In fact, this foundation has been created by U.S. Congress in 1993, the British diplomatic mission in Ukraine. This foundation has offered grants. The website states its objective to give lie to the information, including the information that is being disseminated by our TV channel. Here you have all materials related to our particular TV channel. A lot of facts are being brought up. Here you can see a fake article. The Norwegians have filed a lawsuit for stolen uniform or form. Here's a reference to our TV channel. It mentions that Mr. Yuri Bidnikov has given an interview during which he has stated that Norwegians have filed a lawsuit against us for having stolen a pixel form. These are the words that have been written by him. However, the whole campaign is not against Mr. Bidnikov. On the contrary, there is an attempt to expose those who are behind this fake information. In fact, here the position that is chosen is the one that is more comfortable for some other circles. Perhaps we have created an uncomfortable situation for someone else. In fact, I would like to read a couple of words or phrases.
If possible.
Иван, потому что это та же пропаганда.
Every second news item is a lie. Alexei.
Если это объективный...
If this is an objective source of information and you're responsible for its veracity, then perhaps you should give more information about yourself. Who are you and why is it that all events are covered in a one-sided manner? I would like to point to the fact that Often, Ukrainian media do not publish information related to both Ukrainians and Russians. There is no objective coverage of the events. Let's take April 2014, when our reporter has stepped upon a mine and received serious wounds. However, Ukrainian media never covered this event. At the same time, OSCE has offered us support in this respect. For example, there was an article stating that Ukraine has been exercising pressure upon us.
I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we have a very long list of persons who would like to make a statement. I need to ask you to kindly keep it to 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Otherwise, I'll be forced to start using the clock. I think, sorry to interrupt you, Barbara, but I think we are now at a good point to have a coffee break. I've kept a list of everybody who I noticed who has raised their hand so far. It's quite a few people on the list, which we will take over and continue after we enjoy a few minutes of refreshments. Thank you.